The arrival. The road into Hollow Vale was not marked on most maps. It was a thin, crumbling stretch of stone road that wound through forests so thick,
Good evening.
sunlight rarely touched the ground.
I am Eleanor Price.
Eleanor Price had heard of the village only by accident, in a faded journal she had found in an archive in London. The entry was a cryptic one: they have no mirrors in Hollow Vale. None at all. Not glass, not water, not silver. They live without reflections. That line had haunted Eleanor for months. As a historian of folklore and forgotten villages, she was drawn to anomalies, especially those steeped in superstition. Her colleagues dismissed Hollow Vale as just another isolated community clinging to old fears. But to Eleanor, the absence of mirrors was not just a curiosity, it was a puzzle. The village revealed itself slowly as she emerged from the forest. Nestled in the valley's hollow, the cottages looked older than centuries, their roofs sagging under moss and time. Smoke rose from a handful of chimneys, and the narrow dirt streets seemed deserted. Eleanor noticed immediately what the journal had described: every window was shuttered, covered in thick boards or nailed planks. No glass panes gleamed in the weak daylight. No shine of water reflected the sky. As she led her carriage horse down the slope, a few villagers emerged from doorways to watch. Their faces were pale, their clothes plain. Their eyes followed her not with curiosity, but with a kind of unease, as if they had already guessed why she had come. An older woman, bent with age, muttered loud enough for Eleanor to hear. "Another seeker, another fool." Eleanor pretended not to notice. She stopped in front of what looked like an inn. A weathered sign swung above the door, its paint nearly gone. A single word could still be read: "The Lantern's Rest." Inside, the air smelled of smoke and damp wood. A man in his 60s stood behind the counter, his hands rough from work. He gave Eleanor a measured glance as she entered. "You're not from here," he said flatly. "No," Eleanor replied, pulling off her gloves. "I've come to study Hollow Vale. I'm a historian." The man's expression darkened. "Historians dig up things better left buried. I'm not here to cause trouble. Just to learn." At that, the man sighed and motioned toward a chair near the fire. "Then you'd best sit. If you're staying, you'll need to understand the rules." Eleanor sat, notebook ready. The innkeeper introduced himself as Jonas Wren. His voice dropped low as he spoke, as though the walls might be listening. "There are no mirrors in Hollow Vale. Not in homes, not in the square, not in the chapel. You'll find glass is shattered, water wells covered, even the river avoided after dark. We live without reflections, and that's the only reason we're still here." "Why?" Eleanor asked, pen poised. Jonas's eyes flicked toward the darkened window. "Because reflections are not ours. They belong to something else. Something that watches from the other side. And once it sees you, once it shows you, it never lets go." Eleanor leaned forward. "You're talking about the mirror, aren't you? The one the villagers whisper about." Jonas's lips tightened. "The Mirror of Hollow Vale is no rumor. It's real. A cursed thing that should never have been made. And if you've any sense, you'll turn around and leave before nightfall." But Eleanor's pulse quickened. His warning only sharpened her hunger to know more. She spent the rest of the day walking the village, taking careful notes. The place seemed frozen in time. The people avoided her, closing shutters when she passed. Children peered from doorways until mothers pulled them inside. And always, there was that absence of reflection. Buckets of water were covered with cloths. Even metal tools had been dulled and blackened to prevent a shine. Near the center of the square, Eleanor found the church. It was old, its stone walls covered in ivy, its doors bound shut with chains. Yet above the archway, carved into the stone, she saw strange symbols, circles within circles, intersected by jagged lines. Protective symbols. She had seen similar markings in other parts of Europe, often carved to ward off spirits. That night, at the inn, she pressed Jonas for more. He resisted at first, muttering that outsiders never listened, that curiosity only brought suffering. But after a long silence, he said quietly, "The mirror was made by a glassmaker, centuries ago. He was no ordinary craftsman. He wanted to make a mirror that showed the truth, not the face you wear, but the soul beneath. But the soul is not meant to be seen. Jonas's voice grew heavy. The glassmaker struck a bargain with something from beyond. Some say it was the devil. Others say it was older still. When the mirror was finished, it showed not truth, but death. Whoever gazed into it saw their own end, clear as day. And once the mirror revealed it, that fate always came to pass. There was no escaping it. Eleanor's skin prickled. She pressed her pen harder against the page. The villagers tried to destroy it, Jonas continued. They smashed it, burned it, buried it. But it always returned, whole again, waiting for another soul. So, we banished mirrors from our lives. If you never see yourself, the mirror cannot claim you. Eleanor hesitated, then asked the question she knew she shouldn't. Where is it now? Jonas's eyes burned into hers. Buried in the old chapel. Sealed away. And may it stay there until the earth itself forgets us. That night, Eleanor lay awake in the narrow inn bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. Every word Jonas spoke replayed in her mind. The historian in her burned with questions. If this mirror truly existed, it was a relic unlike any other, an artifact of folklore made flesh. A proof of legend. Sleep never came. At dawn, Eleanor packed her bag, notebook, and lantern. By the time the sun broke the horizon, she was already walking toward the chapel at the edge of the vale. The villagers watched her from doorways, silent, their eyes filled with pity, or was it fear? The path wound through overgrown trees, the ruins of the chapel looming against the pale sky. Its spire was broken, its stones blackened by time. The heavy doors were chained, but Eleanor noticed the wood was rotting. It would not hold long. As she set down her lantern and pried at the chains, she thought of Jonas's warning, of the muttered words of the old woman when she first arrived, another seeker. Another fool. The chain snapped with a crack. The door creaked open. Cold, damp air spilled out, carrying the faint scent of ashes and something metallic like old blood. Eleanor stepped inside, and the chapel swallowed her whole. The chapel of Hollow Vale was no longer a place of worship. Its stained glass windows had long since been shattered, leaving jagged gaps where colored light should have spilled. Now, only cold air and crawling ivy filled the holes. The pews were broken, their splinters scattered across the damp stone floor. Time had hollowed it out, leaving only bones of wood and stone. Eleanor lifted her lantern, the golden light flickering across carvings in the walls. Circles, triangles, jagged lines, symbols upon symbols, etched in desperation. They were not decorations, she realized. They were wards. The walls were scarred with them, like claw marks left by frightened hands. She moved deeper, her boots echoing in the silence. Every breath seemed too loud. The smell of mold and iron grew stronger, clinging to her throat. At the altar, she stopped. The great slab of stone had been split in two, as though something beneath had forced its way out. Beneath the altar, half buried in shadow, stood the object she had come for. The mirror. It was taller than she expected, nearly reaching the broken rafters. Its frame was blackened oak, carved with patterns that twisted and wreathed if she looked too long. The surface of the glass was cracked, yet somehow unbroken. The fractures spread like veins across water, but the glass itself remained intact, refusing to shatter completely. For a long moment, Eleanor could not move. Her skin prickled, her breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. But her mind, the part of her that had chased this legend across archives and whispers, pushed her forward. She stepped closer. The lantern light glowed on the glass, but no reflection met her gaze. No flicker of her face, no outline of her body. The mirror was dark, like a pool of black water at night. Her heart pounded. She reached into her satchel, pulling free her notebook. Her hand trembled as she wrote. The Mirror of Hollow Vale is real. It exists within the chapel ruins, sealed beneath the altar. Frame, oak. Surface, cracked, yet strangely resistant. No natural reflection visible. She swallowed hard, then looked up again. This time, something moved. Not her reflection, not light, something deeper, like a ripple beneath the surface of the glass. The darkness seemed to shift, bending inward, as though the mirror itself were breathing. Eleanor froze. The surface brightened faintly, and suddenly there she was. Her reflection stared back at her. Pale face, wide eyes, lantern trembling in her grip. A rush of relief flooded her chest. Just her imagination, she told herself. The mirror was old, strange, but still just glass. But then the reflection changed. Her mirrored self tilted its head at a strange angle, one Eleanor had not made. Its mouth twitched upward into a smile that she did not feel on her lips. Eleanor staggered back, nearly dropping the lantern. "No," she whispered. "This isn't possible." The reflection reached up slowly, deliberately, fingers grazing its own throat. With a single motion, it dragged invisible claws across its neck. A red line split open, blood gushing down the mirrored Eleanor's chest. Her eyes widened in terror as she clutched at the wound, choking on blood. She fell to her knees in the reflection, mouth opening in a silent scream. Eleanor gasped, stumbling backward. Her notebook fell from her hand, pages fluttering. But when she blinked, the glass was dark again. Empty. Her reflection was gone. The lantern flickered violently, nearly extinguishing. Shadows crept across the chapel, crawling along the walls, pulling at her feet. Eleanor's breaths came fast and shallow. Her rational mind screamed at her to explain it: hallucination, suggestion, exhaustion. Yet deep inside, a voice whispered the truth she did not want to hear. The mirror had shown her death. She forced herself to retrieve the notebook, her hands shaking. Words spilled onto the page, jagged and uneven. The mirror reveals visions, not reflections. Fates. I witnessed myself, throat cut, bleeding. Cannot confirm illusion or truth. Will test further. She stopped writing. The words themselves felt cursed. As she turned to leave, a faint sound echoed behind her. A tap, light, almost like a fingertip against glass. She froze. Another tap, and then another, slow, steady, from the mirror. Eleanor did not look back. She snatched her lantern and fled the chapel, slamming the broken door behind her. The morning light had faded. Dusk was settling in, the sky burning orange and red. She hurried down the path toward the village, her steps uneven, her breath ragged. The villagers were already waiting. Dozens of them stood in the square as she approached, their faces grim. They knew. An old woman stepped forward, the same who had muttered when Eleanor first arrived. Her voice cracked like brittle wood. "You looked, didn't you?" Eleanor's silence was enough. The villagers turned away from her, crossing themselves, whispering prayers. Children were pulled inside homes. Doors slammed shut. Jonas Wren appeared in the doorway of the inn, his face pale. "God help you," he muttered. "The mirror has you now." That night, Eleanor could not sleep. The inn-room felt suffocating, the air thick with silence. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again: the reflection, the blood, the choking scream. When she turned on her lantern, she swore she saw movement in the darkened window. But there was no glass, no reflection. Just boards and night beyond. She poured water into a basin to wash her face. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she leaned over the surface. The water rippled faintly. Her own face looked back, but pale, sickly, eyes wide with fear. And then, just like before, the reflection's mouth twitched into that wrong smile. "No," Eleanor gasped, stumbling back, the basin tipping, water spilling across the floor. She scrambled for her notebook. The visions are not confined to the chapel. They follow. Any reflective surface becomes infected once contact is made. Cannot escape it. Her pen scratched frantically, ink smearing. And then she heard it again. Tap, 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 from the basin, from the spilled water. She clutched her lantern and stared down. The reflection looked up at her from the thin puddle on the floor. Its throat split wide, blood spilling into the water that pooled around her boots. Eleanor screamed. At dawn, She found herself at the door of the inn's chapel annex, pounding until Father Alaric, the last priest of Hollow Vale, opened it. He was thin, with sunken eyes and robes that hung loose around his frail body. "I need to know the truth," Eleanor begged. "What is happening to me?" The priest looked at her as though she were already dead. "You gazed into the mirror," he said softly. "And now it will not let you go. The curse." The chapel annex smelled of smoke and damp stone. Father Alaric led Eleanor inside, his lantern casting soft light across shelves filled with cracked tomes, candles melted into lumps, and faded relics no one had touched in decades. He closed the door firmly, bolting it against the world outside. "Sit," he said quietly, gesturing toward a wooden bench. His voice was soft, but heavy with the kind of weight that comes from knowing too much. Eleanor obeyed, though her body trembled with exhaustion. She had not slept, her eyes were rimmed with red, her notebook clutched to her chest like a shield. "You saw it, didn't you?" Alaric said, lowering himself into a chair opposite her. "The mirror does not lie." Eleanor swallowed hard. "I don't know what I saw. I think I saw my death. But it wasn't real. It couldn't be real." Alaric's eyes, hollow and ancient, locked onto hers. "The mirror does not show what is. It shows what must be. And once you see it, you cannot run from it. The reflection becomes your shadow." Her stomach twisted. She wanted to argue, to demand sense and reason, but a part of her already knew he was right. The images had followed her into water, into dreams. Even now, she could feel her reflection watching from the glimmer of the lantern glass. "What is it?" Eleanor whispered. "What made that mirror?" Alaric leaned back slowly, his thin fingers steepled together. The lantern light carved shadows across his lined face. "It began," he said, "with a man named Cassian Verrick. A glassmaker. He lived centuries ago, before Hollow Vale was cursed. Verrick was no ordinary craftsman. He was brilliant, but ambitious, greedy. He believed glass could capture more than light. He said it could hold memory, even soul." Eleanor's heart beat faster. She scrawled the name into her notebook, her hand shaking. "He built mirrors unlike any seen before," Alaric continued. "So clear they seemed like water, so deep they seemed alive. Nobles and kings sought his work. But it wasn't enough. Verrick wanted more. He wanted a mirror that would never lie. A mirror that would reveal truth itself." Alaric's eyes darkened. "And so he prayed, not to God, but to something else. Something that answers when desperate men whisper into the dark." Eleanor's skin prickled. The air in the annex felt heavier, as though even speaking of this thing invited it closer. "What did he summon?" she asked. The priest's gaze dropped to the floor. "No one knows its name. Some called it the voice beneath the glass. Others said it was older than words, older than men. It promised Verrick what he desired, a mirror that would never lie. But the truth it gave was poisoned." Alaric's hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles white. The first to gaze into Verrick's mirror saw themselves not as they were, but as they would be, dead. Some saw themselves drowning, others burning, others torn apart. And each time, the death they saw came to pass. No matter how they struggled, no matter how they hid, the mirror's truth cannot be outrun. Eleanor's throat tightened. The memory of her reflection, throat slit and bleeding, burned behind her eyes. "What happened to Verrick?" she asked. The priest's face twisted with something between sorrow and fear. "The stories say he tried to break the mirror when his own reflection turned on him. But it would not shatter. No fire would crack it, no hammer could fracture it. The mirror only grew darker, hungrier. Verrick vanished soon after. Some say it took him. Others say his soul was swallowed, trapped forever inside." Alaric leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The villagers destroyed his workshop. They burned his home. They cast the mirror into the chapel, sealing it beneath wards and prayers. But it could not be destroyed. It waits. It remembers. Every soul who dares gaze into it becomes part of it." The words pressed down on Eleanor like a weight she could not bear. She clutched her notebook tighter, her nails digging into the leather. "So you're telling me, she said hoarsely, "that I'm already dead. That there's nothing I can do." Alaric's silence was answer enough. That night, Eleanor tried to flee Hollow Vale. She saddled a horse from the inn stable, heart pounding as she rode toward the forest path. But the further she went, the darker the night became. The trees loomed like walls, their branches closing overhead. The path she had taken hours before seemed to stretch endlessly, no landmarks, no moonlight, no end. Her horse grew restless, whinnying, eyes rolling with fear. And then she saw it. In the black between the trees, a glimmer of glass. The mirror, standing in the middle of the path, its cracked surface gleaming faintly. Her reflection waited, throat already cut, blood streaming down her white dress. Its hand pressed against the glass, tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Eleanor yanked the reins, wheeling the horse around, galloping back toward the village. No matter where she went, the reflection followed. In the puddles along the path. In the gleam of the horse's eyes. In the sheen of her own sweat. By dawn, she stumbled back into Hollow Vale, broken and weeping. The villagers avoided her now. Doors locked when she passed, curtains drawn. Children whispered that she would soon be taken. Only Father Alaric still allowed her near, and even he looked at her with pity rather than hope. "You cannot run from it," he told her as they stood in the annex, candles burning low. "You cannot fight it. The mirror is patient. It will wait until the moment is right, and then what you saw will come to pass." "But there must be a way," Eleanor cried, slamming her notebook onto the table. "If it can't be broken, then perhaps it can be bound. Or buried. Or sealed." Alaric shook his head. "Many have tried. Generations of priests carved wards into the chapel, drowned the mirror in holy water, encased it in stone. Yet always it returned. Always it stood waiting." Eleanor's voice broke. "Then what am I supposed to do? Just wait for it to kill me?" The priest looked at her for a long moment. His eyes softened, but his words carried no comfort. "You asked for truth," he said. "The mirror has given it to you. Perhaps the only choice left is whether you face it with fear, or with defiance." That night, Eleanor dreamed. She stood in the chapel again, lantern flickering. The mirror loomed before her, surface rippling like water. Her reflection smiled through blood and broken glass. But this time, it spoke. "You cannot escape me," it whispered, its voice like wind across ice. "I am not your shadow. I am your ending." Eleanor woke screaming, the innkeeper pounding on her door, demanding silence. She pressed her shaking hands to her face. Her notebook lay open on the bedside table. She had not touched it, yet words had appeared on the page. "I will see you soon." From then on, Eleanor could no longer tell when she was awake or dreaming. Reflections appeared at every turn. Sometimes she saw herself walking behind her own body. Sometimes she caught her reflection blinking after she had not. Sometimes she heard her own voice whisper from the glass, "Closer, come closer." At last, after days of torment, she returned to Father Alaric. "I have to go back," she said, her voice hollow, her eyes rimmed with sleepless shadows. "To the chapel, to the mirror. If I'm going to die, then I'll meet it on my own terms." The priest's face fell, but he did not argue. Perhaps he knew it was the only path left. "Then take this," he said, pressing a small silver crucifix into her palm. "It won't save you, but perhaps it will remind you that your soul belongs to something greater than the glass." Eleanor nodded numbly. She clutched the crucifix tight, the metal warm against her skin. She turned toward the chapel, her lantern in hand, her footsteps echoing across the empty square. Behind her, the villagers watched silently from their shuttered windows. Not one moved to stop her. Not one dared, for they all knew what awaited in the ruins. The mirror was patient. The mirror was waiting. The final reflection. The ruins of the chapel rose against the night like a broken jawbone, jagged stone teeth biting into the fog. Eleanor stood at its threshold, lantern trembling in her hand, the silver crucifix pressed hard against her chest. The air was unnaturally still. Not a bird stirred, not a leaf rustled. Even the insects that normally swarmed around Flame were absent. Hollow Vale itself seemed to hold its breath. She stepped inside. The scent of damp stone and burnt incense clung to the air. Her footsteps echoed across the cracked flagstones, mingling with faint dripping from the broken roof. In the center of the nave, half covered in moss and dust, the mirror waited. It stood taller than a man, its surface fractured by hairline cracks that spiderwebbed outward. Yet the glass gleamed as if freshly polished, catching her lantern light and holding it too long, too hungrily. Her reflection looked back at her, pale and hollow-eyed, throat slit open and weeping endless streams of blood. Tap, 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 its fingers pressed against the inside of the glass. Eleanor's knees wavered, but she clenched her jaw. She would not run, not this time. She set the lantern down at her feet, the flame throwing wild shadows across the broken walls. Then she raised the crucifix. In the name of God, she began, but the words stuck in her throat as the mirror pulsed. The cracks glowed faintly, veins of white fire threading across the glass. Her reflection tilted its head, smiling with her own lips. "You think that will stop me?" it whispered, though its mouth did not move. "Do you not understand? I am you." Her breath caught. "You're nothing but a shadow. A trick." The reflection's bloody smile widened. "I am your truth. You cannot unsee me. You cannot unknow me. I am what you will be. And soon, you will join me." The surface rippled like water. Eleanor stumbled back, clutching the crucifix so hard its edges bit into her palm. The lantern flickered, nearly snuffing out. But something hardened in her chest. Fear had gnawed at her for days, hollowing her out, but beneath it, something else smoldered, defiance. "No," she whispered. Then louder, "No." She stepped forward until she was inches from the glass. "You don't get to win. I won't let you. You may show me my death, but I'll decide how it comes. Not you." Her reflection tilted its head again. Then it laughed, a hollow, ringing sound that seemed to echo from the stones themselves. "Then come," it whispered. "Step through." The glass rippled outward, and before Eleanor could react, a pale hand burst from the surface, seizing her wrist. She screamed, trying to wrench free, but the grip was impossibly strong. Another hand reached through, clutching her throat. The reflection, her reflection, pulled, dragging her toward the glass. She thrashed wildly, the crucifix swinging from her fist. With a desperate cry, she slammed it against the mirror. A shriek split the air, not from her but from the glass itself. The cracks blazed white-hot. The reflection convulsed, its face twisting with fury. "No," it roared. "You are mine." Eleanor struck again and again, the crucifix clanging against the surface. Each blow sent ripples racing across the glass. The mirror shook, the chapel walls vibrating, dust cascading from the ceiling. And then, the reflection's bloody grin vanished. Its eyes widened in sudden terror. A fracture spidered outward from the point of impact, deeper than the rest, glowing with unbearable light. The mirror screamed, not the glass, but the voices within, the trapped souls. Dozens, hundreds, shrieking all at once, wailing in agony. Faces swam across the surface, men, women, children, their mouths open in eternal cries. Eleanor's own reflection wreathed, its throat opening wider, blood pouring endlessly. "You can't kill me," it shrieked. "You are me." Summoning every shred of strength left in her trembling body, Eleanor raised the crucifix one final time and drove it into the fracture. The mirror shattered. The sound was deafening, like thunder cracking the earth in two. Shards exploded outward in a storm of glass and light. Eleanor was thrown backward, slammed against the chapel floor, the lantern snuffing out. Silence followed. For a long moment, Eleanor lay gasping in the dark, her ears ringing. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her hands bleeding from cuts, her heart pounding in her chest. The mirror was gone. Only a jagged frame remained, empty and black. Had she done it? Had she broken the curse? She staggered to her feet, clutching the crucifix. Her reflection no longer followed her in the shards scattered across the floor. Only her own exhausted, bloodied face stared back. Relief swelled in her chest, fragile and trembling. She let out a laugh, half a sob, half a sigh. She had beaten it, she had beaten the mirror. Or so she thought. The villagers found her the next morning, collapsed outside the chapel. She was alive, though pale and shaken, and they brought her to the inn to recover. Word spread quickly. Eleanor Price had broken the mirror. The curse was over. For the first time in generations, Hollow Vale dared to hope. But that night, as Eleanor lay in her bed, the candle guttered low, she heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Her breath froze. Slowly, she turned toward the window. There, in the faint glow of the moonlight, her reflection stared back. Its throat was slit. Its lips were smiling. "I told you," it whispered, though no sound should have passed through the glass. "You cannot break me. You are mine." Her scream echoed through the village, chilling every soul that heard it. When the innkeeper rushed into her room, the bed was empty. Only her notebook lay open on the sheets, a single sentence scrawled in handwriting that was not her own. "The mirror remembers." To this day, the chapel ruins of Hollow Vale stand silent. The villagers whisper that on moonless nights, if you dare to walk among the stones, you may hear it. A faint tapping, like fingers on glass. And if you're foolish enough to follow the sound, you might find a shard of mirror lying in the moss. Look too closely into it, and you won't see yourself. You'll see Eleanor Price, and she'll be smiling.